Welcome back to day 2 of our little inverse space painting. Now let's take a look at what we've done. While I was off camera, I started laying in. I realized before I needed to paint the space, all the black here, the stars, the nebulas and everything, I needed to get the silhouette of these crystal buildings in place. And then as I was putting in these masks, just from little pieces of cut tape, I realized, you know what, I don't need to have masks for this part because everything we're painting after is going to be on top. Well, from this view it's going to be behind. So I can just paint those buildings in. And while I really like the way that these mask buildings are shaped, I don't think that's going to be the fastest way to get the result we're looking for. So what I'm going to have to do for these edges, let's think about this before we actually do. Once I peel this mask off, then I can paint those edges. So we'll do that. We'll put those edges in where the mask is. That's perfect. That's great. So what I will do is one more time around, and I'm looking for where I've marked buildings going off the silhouette. And I think I'm good. There's one right there. And I've painted over my marks just a little bit, so they are kind of hard to see. But there's also this energy beam coming out of the core to this planet. So I was able to follow that up and find my mark. And I've gotten way more slow dry than paint right now. That's why it looks so thin. Just checking my camera to make sure I'm centered enough. There we go. Now I am using a square brush for these buildings because it gives me the advantage of being able to paint shapes that are both wide and straight, narrow and straight, and create these crystal shapes coming up like that. Is that even showing up? I can barely see it on the tape, but I'm colorblind. That's not really showing up well. I'm going to just a moment pick a black color And by a black color, obviously I mean black. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So I can paint these wide shapes. I can paint these, some people call these a chisel tip, but that's wrong. A chisel tip actually is like a square tip, except the bristles are at an angle. But chisels are great for doing line work like this. Square brushes are also very good for doing this type of line work. But I wanted to have these crystal-y shapes coming off of the towers. So I've been making shapes like this. And I realize I'm painting upside down right now, but I've been painting upside down on this planet for a while. Because some of these are underneath the planet. So, just kind of making a random crystal shape. Doing this shape is much easier with a square tip brush than it would be with a liner or perhaps even a chisel. So there we go. We've got this kind of square shape at the bottom with a obelisk coming off of it. So that's why I chose this brush instead of continuing with the round as I was using yesterday. So where are we at? The next thing I want to do before getting the star field in, before getting the black in, because that is going to be very close to the next step, is I want to lay in a silhouette around the planet. I think I'm going to have a light source kind of off this direction. So when we're looking at it, it's going to look, I turned my camera upside down so that you can see it the same way I'm looking at it. So I'm going to be viewing this product like this. This painting is going to look like this. And you can see where I've dragged it through paint. I need to clean that off too. But that's on the front, not on the back, so I'm not too worried about that at this stage. That'll be during cleanup. Pardon me. So I'm thinking a light source down here. I'm going to create the hottest part, or the brightest part rather, is going to be here. This is going to be in shadow, probably this much of the planet. Yes, I know yesterday I was saying this much of the planet was going to be in shadow and I was going to have the light source be back there. But I don't think I want to put a light source in the painting. So the light source will be off camera, kind of behind the viewer. So that'll put our hot spot here. It'll fade out until we get about right here at the third mark. Will be very, very dark, like almost right away. And then it will fade to lighter on the edge just a little bit. But around the outside, there will be a halo of, like an atmospheric halo. And that's going to be strongest on this side and a little bit on this side. And that's going to help create a break in contrast between the blackness of space and the planet itself. Now, normally you would want to have that strong contrast. And the reason I'm going to create a break in the contrast is because this side of the planet is going to be so much darker. And with black space right here, there won't be as much contrast as the light side of the planet is going to have. So to maintain the shape of the planet in the viewer's mind, in your mind, I'm going to put that white halo in over there. There we go. And there we are. So that's where we are right now. Now, checking out that halo around the planet. That's much easier to check with something dark behind. As I was lining up this little hole that I made with the light part, it's much easier to check the progress of the halo by putting something dark behind the painting as you flip it over. So there we get a much better view of that halo with that dark Scotch-Brite pad. Now I'm going to add the stars. How are you going to add the stars? Well, remember all that paint I mixed up and I said was way too much paint? There it is. And so that my paint does not dry in my cup, I'm going to clean this up later on. I'm just spraying a little bit of Windex in there. Now, Windex is not the preferred airbrush cleaner, but it is a darn good one. And there's my star maker. And it probably is ideal if you add rubber gloves. By going slowly, I'm making larger stars. By going closer, I'm making larger stars. By going farther away, I'm creating a more diffuse star field. But just as in our own galaxy, where we've got a thick field of stars along the disk, I do want to have a much thicker field of stars around the center. Just like this. And I'm going too much of an angle. I've got some stars there that streak. So right now, while it's wet, I'm just going to take the back edge. Notice the edge is up. We're off camera. You can't notice it. So I've got the edge up, and I'm just going to scrape that paint. Now these stars dry really fast, so this is a great way to get rid of mistakes at this stage. There we go. Add a little more paint. I'm actually going to switch hands because the reason that streaked is because I'm right-handed and I was spraying at an angle on the sharp angle of the glass. So I'm going to try to hit the glass more square by going lefty and going slow and close to create larger stars. Now, just as in our own galactic disk, when we look at the Milky Way at night, and if you're lucky enough to live close enough to the country that you've actually seen the night sky with no light poisoning in it, or light pollution, it is incredible sight. But as the disk gets, let me move up to the center, as your vision rather gets closer and closer to the side of the disk of the Milky Way, the stars get closer and closer together. And then right along the edge of the disk, where you're looking through most of the Milky Way galaxy, that's where you can start to see a lot of dust in between the stars. And the way that that shows up is there's this dark line that kind of snakes through the center of the Milky Way stars. And the way that I'm going to mimic that is just with this little pouncer here. I'm probably going to add more black. And I added water to the pouncer. But since I still have some slow dry medium over here, I'm going to add that as well. I should have added that in the first place. And the effect that I'm going for is kind of like this. And it's going to be kind of a cartoony looking version of the dust field, and I'm too thin. I can tell I'm too thin because I'm getting bubbles in the paint. And this is the problem that I had last time I was painting with pouncing on that little tiny space painting. The paint was too thin, and so I was getting bubbles. So I'm going to just go here where this is going to be the farthest point away, And I'm just going to create these kind of round things. And they're slightly disconnected at this point, but I do want them to meander and separate and come back together. So we'll go like this. And I just want to make sure real quick as we're putting our first black over the halo that our halo is going to be thick enough. It looks like it's going to be. And the reason I'm doing this at this stage is because when we get to the painting of the space nebula, the nebulas of space, they're going to be multicolored. There we go. And I want to kind of get these nice round connected shapes. Kind of like Kirby dots. Kind of. I want this to look a little bit comic booky, and at the same time I want it to look a little more natural, but kind of similar to the Steven Universe art style. So we'll get off here. And I probably should switch to a larger pouncer at this point, but I am not going to, just because I think this shape is going to do us the most good for now. And I am letting this get thinner towards the center. If you look at the dust field of right in the very center of our own Milky Way galaxy, it does separate in some places and come together again. So you can see black night, or rather the glow of nebulas through them, even if you can't make out specific nebulae. So there we go. I'm going to put a break in it entirely right there, just because I can. So I am going back just to add a couple more. There we go. And using my rag. All right, so let's take a look at how this is from the front. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So the star field is on top of the dark dust cloud, right? And they're very small, very separated out there. I think I want some larger stars. So let's see what we can do about that. I'm going to use my round sable here. I believe this is number 3 again. Yeah, this is number 3, the same guy we were using before. And I'm just going to draw out some, maybe just a touch of slow dry medium in here. But I want to draw out mostly just paint by itself. And I'm going to paint in some larger stars. Now the larger stars are going to be around the dark nebula here. And you'll actually see, if you look at the night sky, you'll see more larger stars farther away from the disk of the Milky Way galaxy. But that doesn't mean that the larger stars aren't there. That just means that they're easier to see, because they are, you got to think of it as a sphere in a 3D shape. All of the stars that are closest to us have nothing to do with the shape of the galaxy. There are more closer stars to us along the axis of, or the disk of the galaxy, than there are above and below us, because the galaxy is thicker that direction. But the very closest stars to us in our local galactic neighborhood are in every direction. So You don't have to worry about creating a realistic star field or even one that looks like it's being seen from Earth, because this is space. It is a different planet. It might be a different galaxy. We don't even know where Homeworld is. Now, one mistake that people make when laying in stars by hand is they'll like dab and they'll go around like this. But what you end up with is it looks like a connect the dots painting, where the dots mean something. And the way that you get away from that is by switching which sides of the painting you're painting on frequently. As you get stars closer together, you're going to have areas where the stars are clumped together and stars are farther apart. Now I'm trying to keep a bead right on the tip of my brush because this is a tapered tip. You get over the black there. It's a tapered tip. So as I paint, I've got that dot right on the tip of my brush, but it'll take the paint off the tip first, so I'll end up with my brush sticking out. That's why some of these stars have little tails on them. That's just the brush tip poking through my paint dot. So I do have to reload frequently. So then the next thing, now that we've got the stars laid in, I just want to make sure this one has a line through it. I want to make sure that's covered up. There we go. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to pick out a couple of those stars. Put it on the black so you can see it. So some of those stars are going to be picked out to shine like that. Okay? And we're not going to put it on the grid. What we're going to do is actually tilt it just a touch. That's a little less than 45 degrees off axis, so that will be fine. And I'm only going to pick out, let's take a look at the front. I think I'm only going to pick out between 4 and 8. I'm not going to pick out very many of them. And I am making this axis the stronger one, so I'll put those tails just a little bit longer. Let's see how that looks. That is 4 of them, 5 of them. Throw my Brillo back there so we can see. I'm trying to talk with my paintbrush in my mouth again, I'm sorry. So we can see how that star field looks. I think 5 of them is plenty. Yes. Now, as I said before, I'm kind of trying to mimic the Steven Universe look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down a little bit of purple right next to my white. And that was way more purple than I expected, but hey, whatever. Let's see how we get here. And about like that. I'm not going to go crazy with the color, but I am going to switch brushes. Beat the devil out of that brush. Thank you, Bob Ross. Some slow dry medium off the edge here and mix that with what I just created. Now I am using my square tip again, and the reason is because the shape I want to make now is a diamond. And this is going to be a single brushstroke shape. So it's going to look just like that. And these shapes are going to be mostly on the grid. There we go. And they tend to be grouped in threes of varying sizes. So let's see if we can do this. Oh yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. Now I want the top and the bottom to end up on the grid, and side to side will end up on the grid. And because these are diamond shapes and not squares, I want them to be slightly narrower than they are tall. So there we go. And you will have an easier time doing this with a square tip brush than with any other brush. And I'll do a tiny, tiny, tiny one right here. Now these diamonds, they do usually line up in relation to each other. So I want to kind of maintain that look. And I'm sure the Crewdiverse, I think they refer to themselves as, the artist crew that works on Steven Universe, pretty sure they have a load of airbrush brushes just to lay in these diamond effects on their background plates. Okay, so now I've got that. Now that I've got that laid out, let's take a look at what we're looking at. Good. Now I'm going to lay in some nebulas. Now normally I would lay in straight red, straight blue, just unadulterated colors. However, because this is a Steven Universe painting, I want to go more pastel. So I'm going to use my yellow, pretty much how it is. I'm going to use my, let's use this airbrush red here. This is bright red. Now I'll show you, this is a transparent color. I'll show you a nice trick for a transparent color that a lot of people don't know. Actually, I'll just tell you what it is. Transparent red, when painting on a translucent surface, transparent surface, or on a white surface, is going to show more of the color behind it. So transparent red is always going to look a little bit pink and a little bit orange. And the way that you combat this, I learned this while airbrushing t-shirts, is any place that you want to look really, really red, you paint down yellow first, and then paint the red over the yellow. And then it looks really red. So in this case, because I'm painting backwards, I'm going to lay the red down first and then do the yellow over it. And that way it will have that yellow behind it. It will look really red. But I'm going for a more pastel look, so I'm going to mute this with some white. Let's see, what other color am I going to use? I've got this this fluorescent pink here, kind of a purpley pink color. So I think we'll use that. And that's an opaque blue. I do not want to use an opaque blue. So I'll just use my ultramarine blue. So those are the primary colors I'm going to be working with. again. And that's much, much better. It's still a little bit of a dirty yellow color, but it'll work. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spray behind this red again. Building up slowly so I don't have streaks in the final look. And on that side of the nebula, I am spraying off of the red now. I'm spraying on the inside of the red. I am building it up to look a little more yellow. And there we are. So that's what we're left with. We've got a little bit of orange showing through. We've got a little bit of yellow showing through, and right here we've got just straight yellow. I want to make that a little more opaque. Not much. There we go. And that's it. That's as far as we're going to go with these colors. The next step is black. Lighter colors will always overwhelm darker colors. I'm sorry, the other way around. Darker colors will always overwhelm lighter colors. So I'm okay with having a little bit of paint down at the bottom here. I grab my rag. I'm just going to spray that through until it looks black. There it goes. That's it. That's all it takes. Now, I'm just going to start covering the whole thing. And while I'm doing this, I do want to demonstrate an effect. Since we were talking about it before, I've got these ripped Scotch-Brite pads, and I was talking about how they make great nebulas and great clouds and stuff. And I'll just show you how I paint through the edge here, and I kind of overlap. Since I'm going to paint all this black, I'm not worried about how that's going to look right now. But see how I get that really cloudy look there on the edge of that where the Scotch-Brite is, and then I can go ahead and I can paint off of the opposing edge a lot more, and it gives me a really soft edge down here. And if you spray a really opposing color through there, a highly contrasting color like a bright yellow or even a white, it stands out even more, and it's wonderful. But for this cartoony looking space, I don't want to have that too much. I want to have that just a little bit. So I'm just going to use my airbrush feathering to create those edges. And since I've already laid in my nebulas, I'm not going to worry about doing that at any point with this black. And there we go. Now, we are not fully covered with black right now. Be aware of that. But we are at a point where we can start seeing the final product. Check that junk out. That is amazing. I love this technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish off the planet here. I'm going to have to scrape off the edges, clean off the edges, clean off the front, and then I'm going to take this outside and I'm going to enamel coat it. Okay? But finishing off the planet, enamel coating it, finishing this off, this is going to have to be in another video. So I'm 3 hours into this project right now, which is actually really good time. I thought I was a lot longer into this. I thought I was going on to 4 or 5 hours. I probably have another hour left on this. Join me again tomorrow for the next video where we finish off this project. If you like what I'm doing so far, like this video, subscribe, comment below. Let me know what it is you like to see, what it is you would like to see me try next.
This is the best day of my life.
I know.